Alright, so in this one, I want to talk about the Armory Pass. That's what I'm going to be focusing on, but I also, look a bit into cases and the case unboxing numbers that have been occurring since this update. But really, I want to discuss the question, is it still worth it to buy the Armory Pass? And, well, as you can see, I have just recently bought 5 more, so you know my answer, but the reason I want to go over this is because last night I was really debating this, and I want to discuss some of the things that I came up with. And the first point I really want to make is I think it's obvious that Valve really wants this Armory Pass to be profitable. If knife prices drop, then people still sell knives on the market. Valve still gets a cut. They can still profit from that. They don't really care. If Armory prices drop below profitable ROI, people stop redeeming these passes and this whole project becomes dead. Valve is no longer making any money from this. So they really want the ROIs to be positive on at least most of, or if not most, then, a few standout items in the armory. So what does that mean? Just because Valve wants it to be profitable, are they going to magically make it that way? Prices are determined by traders, not Valve. And true, but I think that would mean that it's in their interest to maybe change the armory or bring positive updates to the armory in order to increase sentiment around it and really boost these prices. And another follow-up point is that I still think items are going to be removed from the armory. I still think Valve is going to stick to the pretty regular schedule of every 6 months having an update, taking out some things, adding some new things. I do think that will remain the case, because that is one way that they can, at least ensure that there's some stability to this, and that increases the probabilities of it being profitable, I would think. If people know that, the Elemental Craft sticker is going to be removed at some point, then there's a reason to be redeeming it and holding on to it. And just recently, I noticed that the ROIs on these items are already starting to go back up. Most of them dropped below 100%. Some of them were sitting just above 100%, but not above the profitability threshold, which I discussed the Steam tax in my last video. Still haven't figured it out exactly, but based on my calculations, at least with, prices lower than $100, it seems like it's about 13%. So the ROI has to be above 113% for it to be profitable, technically, at least, if you're getting the average return. You could always get lucky, and that is, always a reason that people will continue to open these things, is that there's the gambling aspect. Maybe you do better than the expected ROI. And I still think the armory is an efficient way to gamble. It is, much better ROIs than cases. Even the worst items in the armory are still above the best case ROIs. And so I think people will continue to gamble on the armory. And even if these ROIs don't stay up, we're potentially in a multi-month bear market with the CS economy. It might take a while for, hype to come back. And I do think it will. I think, we will see prices rise again. Now, maybe knives don't go back to anywhere near where they were before. Obviously, I think the dynamic around them has changed, but maybe the money that was once in knives starts going into skins or cases, or other cosmetic items like charms or stickers. I think if I redeem things that I think will be removed in the near future, maybe during the next update in like 5 months from now, then I'd be willing to hold on to some of these things until maybe an announcement comes one day that they're going to be removed and prices start pumping, and then I can sell for a decent profit. Or maybe I want to hold even longer than that for the longer term, because at least specifically with stickers, we know that once they get discontinued, the supply can only go down. Another point I want to bring up is the case unboxing numbers. So after the update, cases started getting opened at a rapid pace. And I already recorded a segment for that, because if I tried to do that while CS is open, my computer would stroke out again. So this is something that was brought up on Arrow's stream yesterday. I was watching it, and he brought up a very interesting point, that when you go on CSGO Case Tracker, you'll notice that a lot of cases are being opened after this new update. Whether it's because all of a sudden reds and the skins that trade up to reds are now more valuable, or whether it's because people lost a bunch of money and are pissed and are just rage gambling. Whatever the reason, people are opening a lot of cases, and I actually want to show you the difference between the cases that were opened this week compared to overall the last month, And the reason I'm not doing daily is because this number has actually gone down, so it does seem like people are maybe slowing down a little bit. When Arrow showed this, it was at like 7.8 million, if I remember correctly. Just looking at the pure numbers, 25 million cases opened in the last week from the 18th of October to the 25th of October, whereas overall in the last month, we've only opened 52. So that's crazy on its own. 50% of the cases opened in the last month were opened just in the last week. And I want to look at a couple specifics because, the ones that stand out, I think, are the Dreams and Nightmares, Recoil, and Revolutions. You look at the weekly versus the monthly, these ones have overpassed the Fever Case in terms of openings. So they clearly have seen the biggest increase, I think, just, eyeballing it. But I want to use a formula here. Basically, what I want to look at is in the last month, 7.566 million Dreams and Nightmares cases have been opened. And what I want to figure out is what percent of those were opened just in the last week. So the formula I'm going to use is I'm going to use 100% divided by 7.566. We're going to say million, but I'm not typing in all those digits. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this number by the amount of Dreams and Nightmares opened in the last week, 4.198 million. That's what it was, right? Yeah, I could round up, but whatever. So 55% of the Dreams and Nightmares cases that were opened in the last month were opened in the last week. If you want me to fact check my math, if you don't believe that I'm doing it correctly, I can take the initial number and multiply by 0.5548 to get 55.48% of my starting number, and that should be exactly what the weekly case opening was, 4.198, if you round up. Obviously, I didn't use all the digits. In other words, the amount of Dreams and Nightmares that were opened last week were previously opened in the last 3 weeks. So there's a drastic increase there. I can do that same calculation for the next case, which is the Recoil, and 54% of the Recoils opened in the last month were opened in the last week, and 58% of the Revolution cases were opened in the last week. So clearly, the case opening numbers have picked up drastically after this update. I also want to figure out this for the Fever Case, and this is much different. So 32% of the Fever cases have been opened in the last week, which is still an increase. If it was staying steady, it should be 25%. It's measuring 30 days, so that would be just over 4 weeks. And I'm not going to go through and calculate all of them. Maybe if there's like a specific case I'm looking at, I may do that. I just thought this was very interesting. So because, number one, we see that, hey, people are still wanting to gamble on CS. Also, now, at least in my mind, I think skins are inherently more valuable because you know that even if you're pulling blues, purples, pinks, you could theoretically trade all of them up and eventually gather up enough skins to craft a knife, which for a lot of people is the ultimate goal. Now, maybe that changed. Now, maybe people are hunting reds, but even then, reds become much more valuable. You can trade up your pinks or purples and just try and hunt reds. I still think people will open cases. I still think people will open the cases that they were opening previously. The Fever Case has been the most popular case for a long time, and saw the numbers of them kick up after the update, even though some other cases were being opened at a much higher pace. People are gonna start running out of Fever Cases to open. And I think since the ROIs of the Armory are currently down, there's probably a lot less people buying them. And there's going to be a lot less people with stars on deck for if and when the Fever Case prices rise, because all of a sudden, people opened up most of the ones that are already redeemed. So I don't really think it's a bad idea to maybe, just have some stars on deck, or if the Fever Case starts, going back up towards that $1.50 mark or more. And I may even be redeeming Fever Cases. I don't think it will ever go down below its 80-cent mark, below the redeem rate. I don't see that happening. And I don't really see it staying down around the dollar mark that it's at now either, but that's just my personal opinion. And finally, another point that I have to bring up, big reason why I bought 5 more passes right now with, a little bit of thought into it. I did, kind of want to run through all factors in my head and, try and think about it a little bit. But, a main reason that I did buy these passes is because I can make content from it. I can make YouTube videos about it, and it can help me grow my channel. So that is another important factor to consider that maybe not be a factor for a lot of you. So while I think it is worth it to have the Armory Pass so that I can continue to open these stickers, maybe not everybody else feels that way. And, despite the fact that I do think the Armory will continue to be a good investment, even if I can't, redeem these items and sell them exactly a week later for a great profit like we used to be able to, I'm still collecting these items, and I do think at some point I will be able to make a nice profit from them. So for me, it really wasn't a tough decision to invest more money into these Armory passes. I definitely think confidence overall for everything surrounding CS has been shaken up. This is a really tough situation. I think there's a lot of things to think about. There's a lot of people that maybe even like this update. A lot of people that just have a bunch of skins that are now, maybe worth a bit more, or have a bunch of cases that now seem more appealing. And I think it is possible that this initial reaction was a bit of an overreaction. The market cap being cut in half in like 2 or 3 days is pretty insane. And I think it's possible that maybe for a lot of people, they, don't really have that lack in trust as much as maybe some people that, were more affected by this update. People that, I don't know, had a whole inventory full of knives, for example. Maybe their trust in Valve is completely gone, but, maybe a lot of people actually like this update. Maybe they see it as a better system. Maybe they see skins as more valuable now, knowing that you can ultimately trade them up to knives. There's a lot of interesting things to think about with this update, but I think a few things are true. I think people still want to play CS. I don't think everybody's going to quit playing because of this. I think people are still going to want to gamble. I think people are still going to want cosmetics and skins. I also think people will still want to participate in this market. The reason that I am in CS for the most part is the market. I think the market for the skins is very interesting. Doing anything in any other video game where you grind for cosmetics and then you just see it in your inventory and you can't do anything with it other than, I guess use it for its intended purpose. That just seems boring to me. I, did it for a while when I used to play video games a lot, but it really became more of a waste of time in my head because, there's things I'd rather be doing with my time. And, at least with CS, if I'm grinding for cosmetics, I know that I could sell them. The fact that, the CS has a market for its skins is very interesting, and it's one of the things that drew me in. So I think people are still going to want to participate. But anyways, I think that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment. It helps to grow my channel, and I appreciate the support. And I'll see you all in the next one.